Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sue Ira. I'm from Koru Environmental Consultants. Sorry that I can't be with you today, but thank you to Tauranga City Council and Claudia for inviting me to talk to you all. I'm going to be talking about the economics of water-sensitive urban design, and it's based on work that's been done through the Activating Water-Sensitive Urban Design project that I've been working on with NIWA, Landcare Research and Batstone Associates. So the work that you see is really a collaboration from all of us as part of a national science funded project. So what I'll talk about is a bit about the research background, findings in terms of the costs and the benefits work, and I'd like to take you through the water sensitive design assessment tool that we developed. So as I mentioned, this research came out of funding from the National Science Challenge as Building Better Homes, Towns and Cities project. And we really had three main project aims as part of our research. The first one was to activate a community of practice around green infrastructure and water sensitive urban design. Secondly, it was to deliver some quick wins in terms of key barriers to implementation that we'd identified, and then to look at putting a longer term research plan together. At the moment, the project has come to the end, so we're really in the dissemination phase, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our research findings. So our research was broken up into three main areas. And these areas were based on barriers that were identified during workshops that we had when we started the research. And these areas were around understanding the full life cycle costs of water sensitive urban design, characterizing and evaluating and demonstrating benefits of water sensitive design, and looking at operations-led design and construction for guidance around maintenance as well. We had a number of other projects, as you can see, that we worked on. And all of this information, the reports are now complete, and this information is available on the research website. And I've got the link to that website at the end of the presentation for you. So if you are interested in some of the other areas of our research, you can have a look at those as well. So let's talk a bit about the cost work and understanding costs of water-sensitive urban design or green infrastructure. And really, when we're trying to understand cost, it's a really important part of the decision-making process. But unfortunately, it's something that's quite difficult to research. And because of that, there hasn't been much research done into quantifying long-term costs of alternative forms of development, such as water-sensitive design or green infrastructure. So what we've tried to do through this project is to really focus our research in on what are those long-term maintenance costs that are affecting the overall life cycle costs of green infrastructure. So one way that we can do this is through life cycle cost analysis. And this graph that you can see here gives you a bit of information about what life cycle costing is all about. So it's about trying to get an understanding of the full costs of a stormwater treatment practice over its life cycle, from its acquisition or construction phase costs through the long-term maintenance costs and decommissioning costs if these are envisaged. So the total acquisition costs of these large upfront costs, they relate to things like design and consenting, project management fees, construction and installation. We've then got the annual routine maintenance costs, every day type of maintenance that you would do, things like weeding and mowing, collecting debris, checking inlets and outlets. But also it needs to acknowledge that you have these large scale and infrequent corrective maintenance costs. So for example, for a pond, this would be something like desludging that pond. So you're not going to do it very often, but when you do it, the costs are quite significant. So life cycle costing gives us a platform that we can use to compare different types of stormwater treatment practices against each other in terms of their long-term costs. Other types of costing tools that we have to understand cost are things like doing cost comparisons. And we did do this through our research, and you'll see on our website we've got some case studies where we looked at the difference in costs between traditional forms of development and water-sensitive urban design. You can do cost-benefit analyses, and again, we looked at a lot of benefits, and I'll be talking about that in a moment. And understanding things like avoided costs and cost efficiency, which we'll get into. So we're really going to focus on some of the life cycle costing work that we did. And this costing work was based on existing cost data that I had collected through previous projects. Some of these are shown up here. So cost that I collected when building the Cost NZ stormwater life cycle cost model, the work that was done for NIWA around urban planning that sustains water bodies. There I built a life cycle cost model for a catchment basis rather than a site scale. And also through the Greater Wellington Whaitua Collaborative Modelling Project, we collected a lot of new cost data. But as part of the research, we also wanted to talk to councils, consultants, contractors, industry practitioners to get a real feel for what their costs are, especially with respect to stormwater maintenance. So we were able to get new cost information from 16 different organizations, which really helped to refine our cost database quite a bit. So what this graph here shows that you're looking at is these are the total acquisition costs that we were able to collect, and it's showing you for 4 different green infrastructure practices, for swales, for rain gardens, wetlands, and for green roofs. And so these are just the total acquisition costs, those initial upfront construction, installation, project management costs. And what you can see firstly is that for some of the practices like rain gardens and wetlands, you've got a huge variation in cost. And this is to be expected because the cost is really a factor of the topography, the location that you're constructing the practice in, as well as the different types of construction techniques that you could use to construct that practice. So for wetlands, it can be quite variable, same for rain gardens, whereas we find our data set around swales is far more compressed in terms of the cost. So looking at rain gardens, on average, you would have about a $600 to $700 per square meter of rain garden surface area, total acquisition cost. For wetlands, you're looking at around $500 per square meter of wetland surface area. And for swales, you're looking at about $200 to $250 per linear meter of swale. You can see here as well the number of devices that actually went into making up each of these cost databases. And I've put in some information here for you as well around green roofs. So it's about $250 per square meter of green roof. But just to be aware, that relates just to the green roof components themselves. It doesn't relate to the structural building and roofing component on its own. So yeah, you can see those different costs and that high level of variability within them, but it does give us a general feel for the difference in cost between the different types of practices. So we also looked at maintenance costs, and this was quite a big focus for the project. And what we tried to do was create tables which are fairly similar to the tables in Cost NZ, if you are familiar with those. And those tables provide a list of different types of maintenance activities that you would expect to do for each of those different types of devices. And they would also provide a list of frequencies for each of the activities, and then the unit of that activity and the cost. And these tables are the product of quite a lot of discussion. They were based on best practice in terms of some of those guidelines that you see on the slide there. But also we spoke a lot with council engineers, maintenance engineers, and landscape experts to make sure that we had the right types of activities, the right frequency for those activities, and the cost as well. And based on that work, what we did was we were able to come up with a maintenance model that accounted for 3 different levels of maintenance. One is amenity, then functional, and the bare minimum of maintenance. And I'll take you through the wetland tables to show you what I'm talking about and to give you an example of these different 3 maintenance models. So this is the wetland table for long-term maintenance. What you can see here for routine maintenance, so this is your annual type of maintenance. And here we've got corrective maintenance at the bottom of the slide. These are the different types of activities one would expect to do. And just being aware that these are the main types of activities. There may be a number of others that specific councils would do depending on, say, the location of the wetland or the climatic conditions. Next to the activities, we've got the frequency per year. And this is where the maintenance model comes into its own. So what we've said is that there are different types of or different levels of frequency of visits that you can do in terms of your maintenance. One could be a high level of maintenance, which is a high amenity model. So that would be for a stormwater practice that is in a high amenity area that's well used by people, and you might want to give it a level of, say, a flower bed type of maintenance. The functional frequency model is how often would you need to maintain a device to make sure it functions from a stormwater management perspective, so to meet those stormwater goals. And the bare minimum is around what is the least I have to do to just make sure that the plants don't die and this device survives. So you can see those maintenance models are determined by the frequency or the number of visits that you would have to the device each year and over the life cycle thereof for the corrective maintenance. That just shows you in a more pictorial form what those different types of maintenance models might look like. So for amenity, it's a very high level of amenity in terms of landscaping. Functional, we're talking about just making sure that device is functioning, and bare minimum where not much is happening. What we wanted to do is we wanted to do some modeling around these different types of maintenance models and get an understanding of how the frequency actually affects the long-term operation and maintenance cost for these different practices. And what we found is shown in this graph here. So these are the net present value costs, so the total life cycle costs for different maintenance scenarios for a rain garden, an example rain garden. And what we can see is that, as expected, the high amenity maintenance model is the most expensive. No surprises there. But something that is interesting to see is that actually over the long term, the functional maintenance model is the most cost effective. And whilst you would have thought that the bare minimum would be the cheapest, what we found when we started doing the modelling and having discussions with the maintenance engineers is that whilst you perhaps visiting a certain practice less frequently, you're ending up having to spend a lot more time at that practice, and you have a lot more issues when you get into your corrective maintenance activities, which then increases the costs quite dramatically. So that functional model seems to work quite well. So here you can just see some indicative life cycle cost estimates for the different types of practices and how they compare with each other. And these are net present value dollar per hectare of catchment treated per year over a span of 50 years. So in terms of cost, wetlands are around about $1,500 to $2,000 per hectare per year to remove 75% TSS, in comparison with your rain gardens, which are somewhere up near the $6,000 and $7,000 mark. So that's really understanding and looking at our direct costs. The important thing, though, when we are making decisions around stormwater management is that it's not just about that direct cost, it's also about the costs that you can potentially avoid through different types of development approaches, and also the benefits that can be achieved through a different type of stormwater treatment practice. So what we've wanted to do in our research is try and quantify where the different types of avoided costs might be, so your environmental remediation costs that you can avoid by using green infrastructure as opposed to catch pits and pipes. Project costs that can be avoided, like avoided earthworking costs or avoided hard impervious area costs through using water-sensitive urban design. And then the same types of avoided costs, but, in terms of the environment, looking at cost effectiveness. So what is the cost effectiveness of a particular stormwater practice instead of just the direct cost of that practice? And the same in terms of project cost effectiveness, looking at things like how effective is your water-sensitive design approach in terms of your development yield, your public infrastructure delivery. And that really leads on quite nicely to understanding the benefits, because these avoided costs and cost effectiveness are in some ways some of the benefits of doing a water-sensitive urban design approach. So the benefits work was undertaken by Jonathan Moores and Chris Batstone in the team. And what they did was they looked at a number of different approaches overseas to quantify benefits of water-sensitive urban design and understand how that can be done, as well as the types of benefits that you might get from green infrastructure or water-sensitive urban design. What they found is that most of these benefits can be broken up into two categories. The first being water-related benefits, and these are probably the ones that we're all really familiar with, certainly in terms of benefits around, mimicking the natural hydrological regime, having better water quality, having better habitat quality. But what they found is that there are far wider water-related benefits that aren't just environmental benefits, but also social benefits. So, increasing the ability for people to have contact recreation within their watercourses or within estuaries, allowing for provisioning, which might perhaps not be allowed for under a traditional approach, climate change adaptation, drainage and flood management, which all has social benefits as well as those environmental benefits. The other side of the category that they identified was the non-water related benefits of water-sensitive design. And these, you can see, are huge. And I think this is what came as a real eye-opener for all of us, is that we tend to focus on those water benefits around water-sensitive design, but there's so much more about using green infrastructure in terms of the benefits they provide for preserving natural soils, moderating our air temperature and therefore reducing that heat island effect, sequestering carbon by having lots of vegetation, within our urban environments. And these all lead on to social benefits around things like community health and well-being. And we've all been reading recently about the importance of having a nature dose to help with our mental and physical health. So it's bringing all of these concepts together and working out how using water-sensitive urban design can create and facilitate these types of benefits. So how do we bring all that together into a decision-making framework? And this is something that really challenged us, and we wanted to try and create and build a tool that the stormwater community could use to not only understand the costs, but to try and assess and compare and quantify some of these benefits. So we developed the More Than Water water-sensitive design assessment tool. And what it does is it creates, when you go through the assessment process, it gives you two charts that look a little bit like pizzas, one around assessing the benefits of a particular approach, and the other that assesses some of those indirect costs that I mentioned earlier around cost effectiveness and avoided costs. So in terms of using More Than Water, there's a report again on the research website which explains the process of using More Than Water, and there's a large matrix that sits behind each of these identified benefits, which helps people go through and understand how to assess those benefits. The tool then allows you to assign a level of benefit, so whether or not you think your approach in terms of hydrology has a high, a medium or low level of benefit. The tool also allows people to rank whether or not they believe what level of importance they want to give that benefit, whether it's low, medium or high. It may well be that for some communities provisioning is more important than another type of benefit, so they would want to give that one a high level of importance, for example. And then the final thing that you can assign to your assessment is the reliability of your assessment. So have you used quantifiable data, modeling data, to actually determine whether or not that there is the benefit from the hydrology in terms of your approach, or is it just a gut feel that this is going to be a better way of doing things than, say, a traditional approach? So you can assign whether that reliability of your assessment is high or low. And how we read the chart, what we can see is that those different factors are represented first of all by the length of each of these sectors. So these are all the different benefits that were in that matrix. And if you assess it as high, then that benefit would be coloured in all the way out to the edge of the outer circle. If it's medium, it would come up to this line here where the aquatic habitat quality is, and if it's low, it will be there. And you also have the ability to say, well, actually, some of these benefits don't apply. Apologies. The reliability of your assessment is represented by the intensity of the colour. So the dark colour means that you have highly reliable data to base your assessment on, whereas the lighter colour is a low level of reliability. And the last one is the importance of the sector, which is shown by the width of each of those sectors. So the thicker the sector, the more importance you've given that benefit. So you would have heard Andreas talk about Kirimoko Park, and we used this site as one of our case studies in the Activating WSUD program, and the write-up of that case study is on our website. But I thought I would just show you the More Than Water charts for Kirimoko so that you can see the level of benefits that a water-sensitive design approach gives you. So this is the benefits chart that you can see, and this is for our assessment of a water-sensitive urban design as constructed in Kirimoko Park subdivision. What you can see quite clearly is those hydrological and water quality benefits that we would expect from any stormwater project, and also those drainage benefits to make sure that we keep our communities safe in terms of some of those social benefits. What's really interesting to see, though, is when we start looking at a water-sensitive design approach, how many benefits we're getting in the non-water sectors. So the environmental sector around things like carbon sequestration, habitat quality, natural character, and also from a non-water social perspective. So things like making sure our infrastructure is actually resilient, that it's safe, there is an increase to the property values, and that we're creating healthy, resilient communities. If we look at the business as usual, so if we were to go and construct Kirimoko Park just as a traditional subdivision, we can see that those level of benefits is quite a lot lower. It's actually quite dramatically different, and especially around this social and environmental non-water side. Really what we're seeing is just the benefit of a traditional approach to stormwater drainage. And I think this is where More Than Water becomes really useful, is that we use it as a comparative tool between two different types of developments, and we can see which one will give us a greater level of benefit. We have a similar approach for the cost charts as well. And again, you can see the similar picture that in terms of cost effectiveness and avoided costs, we have a far better outcome and solution both for the environment, the community and the developer, and the councils through a water-sensitive urban design approach than what you would for a business-as-usual approach. So just to leave you with some concluding thoughts, water-sensitive urban design can be cost-effective. You would have seen from Andreas's presentation that we have avoided costs of hard infrastructure, and we've seen that in case studies like Kirimoko, and we can get avoided remediation costs. We can also get a better contaminant removal per dollar spent. So we did a lot of work around trying to understand cost efficiency. And certainly if one's objective is contaminant removal, then swales, rain gardens are far more cost effective at removing contaminants than catch pits, for example. Water-sensitive design benefits extend well beyond hydrology and water quality, and we've seen that through the benefits work and through those More Than Water assessments, just how important some of those social and terrestrial environmental benefits and climatic benefits are from using green infrastructure. We haven't spoken a great deal about maintenance issues themselves, but what we have seen from the modelling is that infrequent maintenance is not the most cost-effective solution, that functional model of frequent maintenance throughout the year really helps to make sure that we keep the costs far lower over the life cycle of a specific practice. And as I mentioned to you, we also did work around a number of other aspects, and that information is all on our project website. We went on a study tour to Melbourne, and we've written up our findings from that study tour. I undertook a review of international review of funding and financial incentives for stormwater treatment and stormwater management to see how can we get a bit more innovative with our funding system here in New Zealand. And there's also a fantastic piece of work on Te Mau reviews and water-sensitive urban design that was done by Troy Brockbank and Emily Afoa. That's available. So all of that information is available on the project website for you to download and hopefully find useful in your work. So thank you very much for your time today and for listening to my talk. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to email me, and then I'm most happy to respond to you as soon as I can. Thank you.